The expert hired by former President Donald Trump's 2020 campaign to find voter fraud has once again debunked the claims of voter fraud. In an op-ed, Ken Block, founder of Simpatico Software Systems, said on Tuesday, this is published by USA Today, said that the extensive research his company did found no evidence of election fraud that contributed to President Joe Biden's win. He said, if voter fraud had impacted the 2020 election, it would already have been proven. Maintaining the lies undermines faith in the foundation of our democracy. Of course, right-wingers immediately are chiming in to say, we're a representative republic. Okay, anyway, I know that's the rage about that, but really, when it comes down to it, there are members of the right that despise democracy. And of course, Trump trying to overturn it, to undo it. So now, Block, getting back to him in his op-ed, he said, he pointed out in his company's contract with the campaign, their obligation to deliver evidence of voter fraud that could be defended in a court of law. So that's what they agreed to. They said, okay, we'll do the work for you. We're going to find the evidence, okay? We're going to find it, and we're going to present it, and it's got to be robust enough to obviously survive a court challenge. Okay, so they looked and looked and looked, and no surprise, they didn't find any because it didn't exist. Now, the fraud that he found, and to say that elections have no fraud is incorrect. They do have a small amount of fraud. It's infinitesimally small. Okay, and usually the result of mistakes. Okay, that just happens. There's no concerted deep state, effort to do fraud upon the American people. No. The fraud that he found was bipartisan, was small, thus failing to provide a solid basis for a legal challenge to an election result in any of the states that they had evaluated. Look, the guy was paid $750,000 by the campaign to analyze fraud in different states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Now, they eventually, were tasked with even more. Basically, there were a lot of people that came with some pretty crazy election conspiracies that they had asked this company to check out. And they're like, well, oh man, that sounds a little nuts, but all right. I mean, we're getting paid for it. Well, I guess we'll look into this. And the other things that they had been asked to look into were like, how do we even investigate that? How are we going to investigate this? This is insanity. I mean, going back to Cuba or Venezuela, right?
In Venezuela.
How am I supposed to look into this? I mean, you got this information from some lady who claims that she was internally decapitated and saw this in a vision, like in a dream. How am I supposed to investigate that? Like, that's not evidence. We could bring you something that's concrete if we find it, but we can't bring you like evidence of the lizard people rigging an election. That's insane. It doesn't exist. So very difficult task, and unsurprising, they were not able to find anything. That said, when they were completed their investigation, when they were pretty sure they turned over every nook and cranny that they could to find any actionable evidence of voter fraud, they turned over their findings to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, directly communicating. In fact, those emails and documents, he writes, show that the voter data available to the campaign contained no evidence of the large-scale voter fraud based on data mining and fraud analytics. More important, claims of voter fraud made by others were verified as false, including proof of why those claims were disproven. There it is. Concrete proof that Trump was told that they had found no evidence of voter fraud by their own experts. Now that's important because he continued to spread a lie and then use that lie to incite his followers, some of them who attacked the Capitol building. Now, despite its findings, Block said the cries that the election was lost or stolen due to voter fraud continue with no sign of stopping. Because, of course, why would they stop if it's so effective at getting Republicans to rage? I mean, I don't know. He continues to write, whether it's a stump speech, outrageous lawsuits like the so-called Kraken cases filed by Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani's lies, or the ongoing misguided efforts of people determined to prove that the election was stolen, the constant drumbeat hardens people's hearts and minds to the truth about the 2020 election. Look, that's the point, though. Look, if there was any evidence, any real evidence that the election was stolen, then of course we want to see it. That's why when they were making those accusations, everyone on the left's like, please show us the evidence. Please show us. If there's something wrong, obviously we want to fix it. We do care about the electoral process. We do care about reality, okay? Even if it means a Trump win, well, I mean, that sucks, but reality is reality. It is what it is. But no, they didn't have any evidence. And that's the point, though. Trump has convinced his followers that the election was stolen from him, and no amount of actual real evidence to the contrary is ever going to change their mind. As Mikey says,
just forget about the evidence.
That's it. That's the mantra. They believe what they want to believe. They live in an alternative reality. Furthermore, Block said that if his company was able to find enough fraudulent votes to question the margin of victory in key battleground states, there would have been no way to determine if the fraudulent ballots were even cast for Trump or Biden. So that's really important. Block wrote, "We vote anonymously for good reason. No candidate can credibly claim that the fraudulent vote was credited to their opponent unless the person who cast that vote tells us." That means, and by the way, like, you're not going to have people that volunteer that unless they were caught and get in trouble. Now, this means that a candidate trying to use voter fraud as a reason to change an election result cannot show that the fraudulent votes caused their election loss. That right there is a pretty devastating point. Kind of exposes the entire narrative about voter fraud and what it's really about. It's been going on for years before Donald Trump. Donald Trump did not come up with the, voter fraud narrative, right? No, he just used an existing narrative that Republicans had used to try to basically pass laws to restrict voting, to make it harder, right? And so now Trump took this and greatly expanded on it in order to discredit his opponents, avoid taking responsibility for his losses. Okay, and again, to try to justify him trying to actually steal the election. Look, the Republican plan under Trump is not to get more people to agree with him. No, it's to try to restrict those who don't agree with them from being able to cast a ballot. Okay, that's the Republican plan. The MAGA plan is also to use this as a scapegoat, to use this as a way to discredit other people, as I mentioned before, and as a way to try to get him out of some very important legal peril. Very dangerous peril, okay? Now, Block ends with a suggestion. Instead of spending time investigating election fraud, he said the U.S. would make better use of time, money, and energy to actually address systemic weaknesses in the nation's election systems. For example, infrastructure that could enforce election integrity, as well as gerrymandering. Now, gerrymandering is something that's really important. It's actually used by both sides. Democrats to create safe districts, Republicans to create safe districts, but it ends up screwing over a lot of people. That's why you have a House of Representatives where Democrats may get a lot more people voting for them, but Republicans will maintain a majority anyway. So, that said, doing those things would be good, but Republicans aren't going to do them because they don't galvanize the conservative base the way this does. The way this narrative of they stole your vote from you, okay? And more importantly, this does not soothe the former president's super fragile ego, which is why, again, Republicans will never do the actual thing because then they lose one of their chief arguments they use for voter suppression. So, look, Block is telling the truth. But unfortunately, I think that truth is going to fall on deaf ears. The people who need to hear it the most are the ones that are never going to listen.